Hey now, it's Sharon, and I'm back to share some ideas, personal opinions, experiences on how we can better policing here in the US. If you're new to the channel, I'm a retired detective. I worked for 20 years for a southeastern city in the US, and I was also in the military. And I'm going to share an opinion today on just an experience I had as a police officer, trying to give you some perspective being a brown female, being brown and female, working in the police department, and some of the things and experiences that I've come across. And I used to be an instructor in the academy, and I got put out of the academy. I told the story before in other videos. There was a question about how policing came about in the U.S. and a student put their hand up, and I'm talking about adults here, put their hand up. They talked about the slave patrols and things like that. Andrew Jackson even came up in the conversation. And I let the conversation go as long as the students asked the questions. But then it was getting like into 10, 15 minutes, and I cut it off. But somebody got upset. I know who the somebody is. But somebody got upset. He went to the director at the time, and I don't know what he said, but it was said. And they basically, what I got out of what he said, what was told to me secondhand, they were upset. Now, it was a group of them. I remember them sitting in the back of the room, and they could care less about the conversation on the historical value of how policing came about. And I do remember one of them saying, oh gosh, something like that. And what kind of pisses me off to this day is people don't want to know the history. And I find that fascinating. People don't want to know. You have to know the beginnings of something in order to fix it. That's with anything. Like the bulb in my car starting to blink off and on. And now I had to go look up, okay, what kind of bulb I needed. Were there any tools that I needed? It's an older model car, so I had to go back and look at that generation, get the right bulb and the model number and things like that. And that's a simple example. But knowing how policing starting, I'm in it, you know? I equate that to doctors. Doctors have to go to school for a long time in order to practice. We as police officers, we're the only group that I can think of where we can stop a person in their direction of travel, wherever they're going, lawfully, and maybe even take away their freedom to move about. And that, I think, only had 7 or 8 months of training altogether. Something to think about. But just knowing the history of policing kind of gave me a different perspective, and it opened my eyes. Even at my current job now, substitute teaching, just younger kids, talking to the adults, in the break room, and we get around to talking politics and all that stuff. People still don't know the history. And then when I start talking to history, here comes a sigh, or they don't want to know. They're off doing something else. And it's just interesting because how do you not want to know? We're talking about voting and all that stuff. If you don't know the history of voting and how it came about for everybody else in this country, you tend to have a skewed opinion about things. So I'll give you this last little piece. We were talking about the divide in the country with the black and the white thing. And so I'm smiling because the person said that they brought up the whole black crime thing. And that is the old white supremacy dog whistle, but they don't know that because they don't know the history. And we need to do a study on that. And I said to them, what kind of study? What kind of study are you talking about? To find out why black folks riot. I said, ain't no black folks rioting. There ain't nobody out there. Well, very few. We're sitting. We're sitting this one out. We're peaceably taking a chill. And it was interesting because they fell back on that. But if you've been paying attention, Black folks ain't out there protesting, not too many. And so I even offered, I said, they've already done studies. And I had to write it down to just tell you the studies really quickly. There's a Chicago commission back in 1922 where they did a study on rioting and all the causes and all that stuff. Then here comes the Kerner Commission in 1968. Same idea. Let's figure out why Black folks are rioting. And then the Ferguson Commission, remember Michael Brown and getting shot and stuff like that? That was 47 years after that. They did a study. Same results. It's not Black folks that are the problem. But I'm not going to get into all of that. I just gave them the names of all the commissions. 46 years after 1922, 1968, and then again in 2015. If we ain't figured it out within almost 80 years, we ain't gonna figure it out. But they know. If you look up the different commissions that I mentioned, it's not Black folks that are the problem. And I wouldn't say it's white folks, it's white supremacy that's the problem. And it's built into the systems, as they found out way back in 1919, actually. But folks didn't want to hear about that. And it's just interesting. I gave her the list. So maybe she goes and looks it up. I don't know. But I gave her the list. But people start the conversations, and then when you know what you're talking about and you add the historical piece of it, because you can go back and study it. If I'm wrong, then definitely come back and tell me so I can go look it up and check it out. But that's what I find interesting. Even in policing, when I was in the academy, and you try to get to the historical perspectives of different things, it seemed like policing and how it started with the slave patrols, that's a touchy subject. And then fast forward to 2026, and we're talking about the current administration and voting, and Black folks acting up, but Black folks are not acting up. There are no riots in the street. They equate that with us, There's nobody rioting, so to speak, in the street. I think that's what they want, but they're not going to get that. They're not going to get that. Because we're definitely voting in November. We'll see. But yeah, anyway, that was that. I just want to share that little bit with you. You have to learn your history in order to make an informed decision. That's what it boils down to. So I'll leave it at that. Like, subscribe, definitely comment if you have a different perspective. We have an online store. The link for that is in the description. I have a book. I don't have it with me right now. The link for that is in the description. It's called My Middle Eastern Conflict, Looking Back at My Future. And did I say online store? Link in the description. Book, link in the description. And as is our tradition, you don't necessarily have to go through a thing to learn from it. Talk to you later. Bye.